The massive space station hung in the void like a jeweled crown, its crystalline spires stretching for miles in every direction. Inside the grand chamber, 12 ancient alien species sat in judgment of the newest discovery in their galaxy. Earth had been found, catalogued, and dismissed as primitive within the span of a single galactic cycle. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at attention in the communications center of Luna Station, watching the holographic display flicker to life. The image showed a towering crystalline being with faceted skin that reflected light in rainbow patterns. Its voice resonated through the chamber like breaking glass. "Greetings, primitive inhabitants of the third planet. I am High Commander Vex Thala of the Zephyrian military caste. Your world has been evaluated by the Galactic Dominion Council and found lacking in technological advancement and cultural sophistication. Commander." Lisa Grant adjusted the receiver array, trying to maintain the signal quality as the alien continued its pronouncement. She had been expecting first contact to be different somehow, perhaps more diplomatic or curious. Instead, this felt like listening to a court reading a sentence. "The Council has determined that your species requires guidance to prevent the typical self-destruction pattern observed in underdeveloped civilizations. You will submit to Dominion authority within 30 of your solar cycles. Compliance will result in integration into our workforce and protection under our governance. Resistance will trigger cleansing protocols to preserve galactic stability." Captain Rick Barnes felt his stomach drop as he watched the transmission from his command post orbiting Mars. 3 of Earth's finest destroyers, the Phoenix, the Liberty, and the Guardian, had been conducting routine patrols when Zephyrian scout ships appeared. The alien vessels were beautiful in their deadliness, shaped like enormous crystalline flowers that seemed to bend light around their edges. What happened next would be burned into Barnes's memory forever. The alien ships did not fire weapons or launch attacks. They simply existed near the human vessels, and one by one the destroyers went dark. Life support failed, engines shut down, and weapon systems became inert. The crews found themselves floating helplessly as their ships became tombs of dead metal. The Zephyrian commander's message continued with casual cruelty. "Your military vessels have been neutralized to demonstrate the futility of resistance. We have technology that renders your weapons obsolete and your defenses meaningless. Your primitive nuclear fission and crude chemical propulsion are curiosities that belong in a museum." Back on Earth, President Helen Murphy sat in the emergency bunker beneath the White House, surrounded by the Global Defense Council. The assembled leaders from every nation watched the alien transmission with growing horror. General Paul Carter, a veteran of 3 wars, looked older than his 60 years as he studied the tactical displays. "Madam President, our analysis is complete. These beings possess energy manipulation capabilities beyond our understanding. They can disable our electronics from range. They travel faster than light. And their preliminary scans suggest they have weapons that can disintegrate matter at the molecular level." Carter's voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly as he turned the pages of his report. Dr. Amy Rodriguez, the head of Earth's Theoretical Physics Division, spoke up from her position at the table. "The energy readings from their scout ships indicate they're using controlled spatial distortion for both propulsion and defensive systems. They're literally bending space-time around their vessels. Our conventional weapons would be like throwing rocks at a tank." The alien transmission shifted to show the Dominion Council chamber. 12 different species sat in judgment, each more alien than the last. There were beings of living energy, creatures that looked like walking trees and others that defied easy description. At the center sat the ethereals, ancient beings whose forms seemed to phase in and out of reality. High Counselor Threshmar spoke with a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The species designation Earth-human has been classified as a minor obstacle to galactic harmony. Historical data indicates that primitive civilizations follow predictable patterns of development. They discover fire, develop agriculture, create tools, and inevitably destroy themselves through warfare or environmental collapse." The ethereal's image flickered as it continued. "Our intervention prevents this wasteful cycle. Species that submit to Dominion guidance are preserved, educated, and assigned productive roles within our civilization. Those that resist are cleansed to prevent contamination of the galactic community." Commander Grant felt sick as she processed the implications. These beings spoke of humanity like they were discussing the management of livestock. The casual way they discussed genocide made her realize that Earth was not dealing with conquerors or even enemies in any traditional sense. These were exterminators who saw humans as nothing more than an infestation to be controlled. Admiral Morrison studied the tactical displays with growing desperation. Earth's combined military forces included nuclear submarines, aircraft carriers, space stations, and orbital defense platforms. Against any human enemy, they would be formidable. Against beings who could disable electronics with a thought and travel between stars at will, they were worse than useless. The Zephyrian commander reappeared on the transmission, its crystalline features reflecting the lights of its ship's bridge. Your response time begins now. 30 solar cycles to announce your submission and begin the transition process. Our cleansing fleet consists of 50 capital ships, each capable of sterilizing a continent. Resistance will result in the elimination of 90% of your population, with survivors relocated to designated work facilities. President Murphy found her voice at last. Is there any possibility of negotiation? Any terms under which Earth could maintain some form of independence? The alien's laugh sounded like wind chimes in a hurricane. Independence is a concept for mature civilizations. You have discovered basic space travel only recently and still fight wars over resources and territory. The Council's decision is final. Submit or face cleansing. As the transmission ended, silence filled the bunker. Outside, 8 billion humans continued their daily lives unaware that their existence hung by a thread. Children played in parks, couples fell in love, artists created beauty, and scientists pushed the boundaries of knowledge. All of it threatened by beings who saw humanity as nothing more than an administrative problem. General Carter was the first to speak. Madam President, I recommend we begin evacuation protocols for major population centers and start moving critical infrastructure underground. If we're going to fight, we need to assume they'll target our cities first. President Murphy nodded slowly. Begin preparations, but do it quietly. I don't want to start a panic, and Paul start reaching out to our allies. If humanity is going to face extinction, we'll do it together. As the meeting broke up, none of the human leaders noticed the small smile that flickered across Dr. Rodriguez's face. She alone had studied the technical readouts from the disabled destroyers, and she had seen something the aliens might have missed. Humanity's weapons might be primitive, but their minds were not. 23 days remained until the Zephyrian deadline, but deep beneath NORAD, Dr. Amy Rodriguez had not slept in 48 hours. The captured alien technology hummed on the examination table, its crystalline structure pulsing with faint energy signatures that defied conventional physics. Her team of scientists worked around the clock, dissecting every component they could safely remove from the disabled scout probe. The energy matrix is more elegant than we initially thought, Rodriguez explained to Admiral Morrison during his daily briefing. They're not generating power in the traditional sense. They're tapping into zero-point energy and channeling it through crystalline conduits that act as both storage and distribution systems. Morrison studied the holographic displays showing the alien device's internal structure. Can we replicate it? Not exactly, but we don't need to. Rodriguez highlighted a section of the energy flow pattern. Look here at the resonance frequency. Their entire system operates on a very specific harmonic wavelength. It's incredibly efficient, but it has a critical vulnerability. If you introduce the right counter frequency, the entire matrix collapses. 3,000 miles away, Colonel Steve Johnson crouched in the shadows of downtown Seattle, watching a Zephyrian reconnaissance drone hover silently above the Space Needle. The device was beautiful in its alien design, a floating crystal sculpture that mapped every building, every street, every potential hiding place in the city below. Johnson's hand signals were precise as he directed his team into position. Sergeant Mary Foster carried the experimental EMP device that Rodriguez's team had designed specifically for this mission. Lieutenant Danny Clark provided overwatch from a rooftop position, his modified rifle loaded with rounds designed to disrupt alien energy fields. The drone's scanning beam swept across their position, and Johnson held his breath. Intelligence suggested the aliens could detect human life signs, but they had yet to demonstrate active monitoring of individual movements. The beam passed over them without stopping, confirming that the Zephyrians viewed humans as too primitive to pose a meaningful threat. Foster activated the EMP device, and the drone shuddered in midair before crashing into the street below. The sound of crystalline components shattering against concrete echoed through the empty streets as Johnson's team moved to secure their prize. Back at Luna Station, Lieutenant Kate Williams hunched over her communication console, headphones pressed tight against her ears as she listened to intercepted alien transmissions. The Dominion species used a complex frequency modulation system, but human computers had proven surprisingly effective at pattern recognition and translation. What she heard made her blood run cold. The aliens were not planning simple conquest or even traditional slavery. The intercepted communications revealed detailed population reduction protocols, genetic screening parameters, and work allocation charts that treated human beings like industrial resources to be optimized. Admiral Morrison needs to hear this immediately, Williams told her supervisor, Commander Lisa Grant. They're planning to eliminate everyone over 50, everyone under 16, and anyone with physical disabilities. The remaining population will be divided into work categories based on physical capabilities and intelligence assessments. Grant felt her hands tremble as she reviewed Williams' translations. How certain are you about these translations? 97% confidence on the technical terms, 100% on the population numbers. Sir, they're talking about reducing Earth's population to fewer than 500 million people. President Murphy's face was pale as she listened to the briefing in the White House Situation Room. General Carter sat beside her, his expression grim as he processed the implications of the intercepted communications. They're not conquerors, Murphy said quietly. They're farmers, and they see us as livestock to be culled. Dr. Frank Pierce, director of the classified Operation Lazarus program, cleared his throat. Madam President, given these revelations, I believe it's time to discuss options we previously considered unthinkable. Pierce's presentation filled the room's screens with technical specifications and theoretical models. Operation Lazarus had been developing weapons concepts deemed too dangerous for conventional warfare, theoretical applications of nuclear technology that pushed the boundaries of physics and ethics. The Orion Drive concept was abandoned in the 1960s as too dangerous for manned spaceflight, Pierce explained. But for unmanned weapons platforms, it offers unprecedented acceleration and destructive potential. We're talking about ships that can reach significant fractions of light speed using sequential nuclear detonations. Carter studied the designs with growing understanding. You're talking about turning our entire nuclear arsenal into kinetic weapons. More than that, Pierce continued. We're talking about weaponizing physics itself. If Rodriguez's team is correct about the alien energy system's vulnerability to specific frequencies, we can design nuclear devices that don't just explode. They can be tuned to disrupt alien technology on a massive scale. Admiral Morrison reviewed the orbital defense preparations from his command center. Earth's response was taking shape across the solar system, but it looked nothing like traditional military deployment. Mining platforms had been converted into weapons factories. Cargo vessels were being retrofitted with experimental drive systems. Even civilian satellites were being repurposed as sensor networks and communication relays. The beauty of humanity's preparation lay in its apparent chaos. To alien observers, Earth looked like it was in panic mode, with ships launching in all directions and industrial activity scattered across dozens of facilities. What they could not see was the careful coordination underlying every seemingly random movement. Captain Billy Walsh stood on the bridge of what had once been a commercial freight hauler. The UES Defiance retained its civilian appearance, but its cargo holds now contained something far deadlier than consumer goods. Experimental fusion charges filled every available space, each one designed to create localized space-time distortions when detonated. How many ships are ready for conversion? Walsh asked his engineering chief. 237 vessels of various sizes, came the reply. Cargo haulers, mining ships, research vessels, even luxury yachts. Every one of them converted into a delivery system for Rodriguez's frequency bombs. The Zephyrian fleet was already moving toward the solar system, their confident transmissions intercepted and decoded by Williams's communication team. Fleet Commander Zarnath spoke casually of the coming cleansing operation and speculated about whether humans would provide amusing entertainment before their inevitable defeat. What the aliens did not understand was that humanity's apparent technological inferiority masked a fundamental difference in thinking. Where other species had developed along predictable paths of advancement, humans had evolved as persistence hunters and problem solvers. They did not simply develop better weapons. They studied their enemies and found ways to turn strength into weakness. Dr. Rodriguez made her final calculations as the deadline approached. The alien energy systems that made them seemingly invincible operated on principles of elegant efficiency and harmonic resonance. Disrupt that resonance and their shields would fail. Their weapons would shut down, and their faster-than-light drives would become death traps. President Murphy signed the final authorization for Operation Lazarus, knowing that success would mark humanity's emergence as a galactic power, while failure would mean extinction. But as she looked around the table at her advisors, she saw something that gave her hope. These humans were not panicking or praying for salvation. They were working, planning, and preparing to fight with every tool at their disposal. They had studied their enemy, identified weaknesses, and crafted a response that would either save their species or destroy it in the attempt. The Zephyrian fleet continued its approach, confident in its technological superiority and the predictable behavior of primitive species. They expected surrender, resistance, or perhaps a futile last stand. What they did not expect was for humans to have spent every moment since first contact learning how to kill them. The Zephyrian fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system, like a force of nature made manifest. 50 capital ships arranged themselves in perfect formation, each vessel a crystalline masterpiece stretching over 2 miles in length. Their hulls caught and refracted starlight into brilliant rainbow displays that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Fleet Commander Zarnath stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Harmony, his crystalline features reflecting the glow of tactical displays. Around him, his officers prepared for what they expected to be a routine cleansing operation. The preliminary scans showed exactly what they had anticipated. A small fleet of primitive human vessels approaching in what appeared to be a desperate final gesture. Analysis of human fleet composition, Zarnath commanded, his voice resonating through the crystal matrix that served as both communication system and ship's computer. 47 vessels detected, his tactical officer reported. Composition appears to be converted civilian craft, obsolete military vessels, and industrial platforms. No energy signatures consistent with advanced weapon systems. Estimated combat effectiveness negligible. Zarnath felt what humans might have called amusement, though Zephyrian emotions operated on different principles. These primitive beings were actually attempting to fight with cargo ships and mining platforms. It would be almost sad if it were not so predictable. Captain Billy Walsh stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the alien fleet's approach on his tactical display. His ship had once carried grain between Earth's agricultural colonies, but now its cargo holds contained something far more volatile. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, each person knowing they were about to die. All ships, this is Defiance Actual, Walsh broadcast on the secured human frequency. Remember, we're not trying to win a space battle today. We're trying to change the rules. The response came from 46 other vessels, each acknowledging their readiness to carry out what would look to any observer like a suicide mission. But Walsh knew better. They were not throwing their lives away in desperation. They were investing them in humanity's future. Admiral Morrison watched the engagement from his hidden command post in the asteroid belt, surrounded by displays showing the positions of both fleets. The Zephyrians had no idea that their primitive enemy had been monitoring their approach for days, tracking their formation patterns and identifying the harmonic frequencies of their shield generators. All stealth platforms, maintain radio silence, Morrison commanded. Wait for the signal. Scattered throughout the solar system, 200 additional human vessels waited in the shadows of moons, asteroids, and planetary rings. Each ship carried nuclear weapons modified according to Dr. Rodriguez's specifications, tuned to specific frequencies that would disrupt Zephyrian technology. The alien fleet began its attack with casual arrogance. Zarnath ordered his ships to use suppression beams rather than lethal weapons, intending to disable the human vessels for easy capture and study. The Zephyrians had never encountered a species foolish enough to actually fight them, and they wanted to understand what drove such suicidal behavior. The suppression beams lanced out across space, directed energy weapons designed to overload primitive electrical systems. They struck the human ships with devastating effect, and one by one the vessels began to explode in brilliant flashes of light and debris. Predictable, Zarnath observed to his officers. Their primitive power systems cannot handle our suppression frequencies. The engagement will be concluded within moments. But something was wrong with the pattern of destruction. The human ships were not simply being overwhelmed by superior firepower. They were detonating in sequence, each explosion occurring at precisely calculated intervals. The debris patterns were not random either, spreading in expanding spheres of superheated plasma and exotic particles. Lieutenant Kate Williams, monitoring communications from the hidden command post, detected the first signs of alien confusion in their intercepted transmissions. The Zephyrian officers were reporting unusual energy readings and unexpected interference with their shield harmonics. Signal detected, Williams reported to Admiral Morrison. Their shields are fluctuating. The first phase of Rodriguez's plan was working perfectly. Each exploding human ship released a carefully tuned electromagnetic pulse designed to create resonance interference with Zephyrian energy systems. The individual pulses were too weak to cause significant damage, but they were synchronized to create a cumulative effect. Commander Lisa Grant, aboard the hidden command vessel UES Retribution, watched her displays as the alien shield frequencies began to destabilize. All stealth units prepare for Phase 2 engagement. Target designation Echo confirmed. Throughout the solar system, human ships emerged from concealment like predators springing a trap. They appeared from behind lunar mountains, rose from planetary ring systems, and dropped out of the asteroid belt's protective shadow. Each vessel locked onto specific targets in the alien formation. Zarneth felt the first emotion he had experienced in centuries: genuine surprise. His tactical displays suddenly filled with new contacts, human vessels appearing in positions that should have been impossible to reach without detection. Worse, his ship's defensive systems were failing to respond properly to targeting commands. "Shield status report," he demanded. "Commander, we are experiencing harmonic cascade failures across all defensive matrices," his technical officer responded, his voice carrying harmonics of confusion and alarm. "The frequency disruption appears to be systematic and intentional." The realization hit the Zephyrian commander like a physical blow. The humans had not attacked his fleet with primitive desperation. They had studied Zephyrian technology, identified its vulnerabilities, and engineered a coordinated assault designed specifically to exploit those weaknesses. Captain Rick Barnes, now commanding a squadron of modified destroyers, gave the order that had been 30 days in the making. "All units weapons free. Fire for effect." Nuclear weapons designed for planetary bombardment streaked through space toward the alien fleet, but these were not conventional warheads. Rodriguez's team had modified each device to detonate at specific frequencies, creating localized distortions in space-time that interfered with Zephyrian energy manipulation. The first nuclear detonation occurred directly between two Zephyrian capital ships, its explosion tuned to disrupt their propulsion systems. The aliens found themselves suddenly unable to maneuver as their faster-than-light drives shut down in protective cascades. More weapons followed, each detonation carefully placed to maximize disruption of alien systems. The Zephyrians, who had ruled the galaxy through technological superiority, found themselves fighting an enemy that had turned their own advantages against them. Zarneth's flagship shuddered as human weapons impacted against hull armor that had never before been tested in actual combat. His shields were failing, his weapon systems were offline, and his once magnificent fleet was being systematically destroyed by beings he had dismissed as primitive. "All ships, emergency withdrawal," he broadcast, but half his fleet could no longer receive the command. Their communication systems had been disrupted by the same frequency weapons that had crippled their defenses. Admiral Morrison watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as Zephyrian ships began exploding in the vacuum of space. Beautiful crystalline hulls cracked and shattered under the assault of human weapons, their elegant designs proving fragile when stripped of energy shielding. The battle lasted less than 2 hours. When the debris finally stopped expanding and the energy readings returned to normal, 47 Zephyrian capital ships had been reduced to glittering fragments. Only 3 vessels managed to escape, their crews traumatized by their first taste of defeat. Captain Walsh had died with his ship in the opening moments of the battle, but his sacrifice had helped make everything that followed possible. The man who had once transported grain between peaceful colonies had become the first human to draw alien blood in defense of his species. As the surviving Zephyrian ships fled toward the galactic core, they carried with them news that would shake the very foundations of the Dominion Council. The primitive species of Earth had not simply resisted. They had won. The news of the Zephyrian fleet's destruction spread across the galaxy like radiation from an exploding star, reaching every civilized world within days of the battle. Species that had cowered before Dominion authority for millennia listened to the reports with emotions they had forgotten they possessed. Hope, disbelief, and for the first time in generations, the possibility of freedom. High Counselor Threshamar of the ethereal caste materialized in the Dominion Council chamber, his ancient form flickering between dimensions as he processed the battle recordings. The footage showed human vessels exploding with calculated precision, their destruction creating conditions that rendered Zephyrian technology useless. More disturbing was the tactical analysis that followed. The primitive species demonstrated understanding of our technology that exceeds many Dominion member races. The ethereals' voice resonated through the chamber. They studied our weaknesses, engineered specific countermeasures, and executed a battle plan with military precision that suggests advanced strategic thinking. The other council members shifted uncomfortably in their various forms of seating. The crystalline collective's representative, a being of living mineral similar to the Zephyrians but far older, spoke with harmonics that betrayed deep concern. How is this possible? Our preliminary scans indicated they had barely achieved interplanetary flight. Their weapons technology appeared centuries behind galactic standards. Threshamar's form solidified as he focused his attention on the tactical displays. They did not advance their technology to match ours. They advanced their understanding to exploit ours. The distinction is significant and troubling. Admiral Rick Barnes stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned UES Vengeance, humanity's first purpose-built interstellar warship. Built from salvaged Zephyrian technology and human engineering principles, it represented a fusion of alien capability with human tactical thinking. His mission was simple in concept but revolutionary in execution: carry the war to the enemy's home territory. The target was Crystallos, the Zephyrian homeworld, a planet of living crystal spires that had never known the touch of warfare. Barnes' fleet consisted of 12 vessels, each carrying weapons designed specifically for psychological impact rather than simple destruction. Dr. Amy Rodriguez had outdone herself with the development of viral nanotechnology that could interface with Zephyrian crystal biology. The nanites were not designed to kill, but to transmit human thoughts and emotions directly into alien consciousness. For species that had never experienced fear or desperation, the psychological impact would be devastating. Approaching Crystallos orbital perimeter, the navigation officer reported. Detecting defensive installations but no active weapon systems. Barnes nodded grimly. The Zephyrians had never needed to defend their homeworld, because no enemy had ever possessed the capability to threaten it. Their arrogance was about to become their vulnerability. The deployment was swift and efficient. Human vessels released clouds of nanites into Crystallos' atmosphere, the microscopic machines seeking out the resonance frequencies that connected individual Zephyrians to their planetary crystal matrix. Within hours, every member of the species would experience something unprecedented: human emotion. On the planet's surface, Zephyrian citizens went about their daily routines until the first nanites made contact. Suddenly, beings who had known only logical thought and harmonic cooperation found themselves flooded with human memories of warfare, loss, determination, and the absolute refusal to surrender. A Zephyrian artisan working on a crystal sculpture suddenly experienced the memory of a human soldier watching his comrades die, feeling the rage and grief that drove humans to fight against impossible odds. A council administrator felt the desperate love of a parent protecting their children, the emotion so alien and overwhelming that the Zephyrian collapsed in what humans would call terror. Colonel Steve Johnson had been promoted to lead humanity's new Special Operations Command, tasked with conducting guerrilla warfare against Dominion infrastructure. His targets were not military installations or population centers, but the communication networks, supply lines, and administrative systems that held the galactic government together. Johnson's team struck without warning and vanished before response forces could arrive. They destroyed hyperlane beacons that allowed faster-than-light travel, disrupted planetary communication arrays, and eliminated key administrators with surgical precision. Each attack was designed to create maximum psychological impact while minimizing collateral damage. The Dominion military found themselves fighting an enemy that ignored every convention of civilized warfare. Humans did not announce their attacks, did not limit themselves to military targets, and did not follow the elaborate codes of conduct that had governed galactic conflict for millennia. Lieutenant Kate Williams, now Director of Human Intelligence Operations, sat in her command center surrounded by displays showing intercepted alien communications from across the galaxy. The psychological warfare campaign was working beyond their most optimistic projections. 17 species have formally declared independence from the Dominion, she reported to Admiral Morrison during their daily briefing. Another 23 have suspended cooperation with Council directives. The Merchant Guild has begun refusing military supply contracts. Morrison studied the galactic political map, watching as entire sectors shifted from Dominion control to independence or open rebellion. What's the Council's response? Panic, Williams replied with satisfaction. They're recalling fleets from border territories to protect core worlds. Some Council species are beginning to negotiate separate peace agreements with their subject populations. The Dominion Council convened an emergency session as reports continued to arrive from across their crumbling empire. The humans had not simply defeated one fleet. They had inspired a galaxy-wide revolution against Dominion authority. The human tactics violate every principle of civilized warfare, declared the representative of the hegemony worlds, a species that resembled metallic spiders. They attack civilian infrastructure, target administrative personnel, and employ psychological weapons against non-combatant populations. Threshmar's form flickered with what might have been ancient memory. Perhaps we have forgotten what uncivilized warfare looks like. Our dominance has been maintained through technological superiority and the assumption that other species would accept our authority. The humans reject both premises. The Council's military advisor, a being called the War Form, projected tactical analyses across the chamber. Human forces are operating with complete disregard for acceptable casualty ratios. They sacrifice individual units to achieve strategic objectives without apparent concern for losses. This behavior pattern is unprecedented among sapient species. Dr. Frank Pierce stood before President Murphy and the Global Defense Council, delivering his assessment of humanity's expanding war effort. We're not fighting a conventional military campaign. We're conducting applied anthropology on a galactic scale. Murphy looked up from the reports detailing human operations across dozens of star systems. Explain that. The Dominion system was built on the assumption that advanced civilizations behave in predictable ways, Pierce continued. They follow rules, respect authority, and accept that some species are naturally dominant. We're showing the galaxy that those assumptions are wrong. The president studied the strategic overview, seeing how human forces were spreading chaos through careful application of asymmetric warfare. Are we winning? We're not trying to win in the traditional sense, Pierce replied. We're trying to demonstrate that the Dominion Council can be defeated. Every successful operation, every freed world, every act of resistance inspired by our example weakens their authority. General Paul Carter added his perspective from years of military experience. We're teaching the galaxy that no government rules by right, only by the consent of the governed. The moment that consent is withdrawn, the most powerful empire becomes just another target. Back on Crystallos, the psychological warfare campaign reached its climax as Zephyrian leaders experienced human concepts of sacrifice and defiance for the first time. Elder Crystal Singer Thanemoth, one of the planet's most revered figures, found himself overwhelmed by the memory of human parents dying to protect their children from alien invaders. The emotional impact shattered his crystalline consciousness in ways that physical weapons never could. For the first time in his 1,000-year existence, he understood what the humans had been fighting for and why they had been willing to die rather than submit. The final transmission from Crystallos reached the Dominion Council chamber as Threshmar and his colleagues watched their carefully ordered galaxy descend into chaos. Species that had been loyal subjects for millennia were learning the human concept of self-determination, and the lesson was spreading faster than any military force could contain. The humans have weaponized revolution itself, Threshmar observed to his fellow council members. They are not conquerors seeking to replace our authority with their own. They are destroyers of the very concept of imposed authority. The galaxy would never be the same, and for the first time in the Dominion's 1,000-year history, the ancient powers that ruled among the stars found themselves afraid. 6 months after the destruction of the Zephyrian fleet, the Galactic Dominion Council faced a crisis that threatened not just their authority, but the very concept of centralized galactic government. 17 member species had declared complete independence. 23 others had suspended cooperation with Council directives, and rebel movements inspired by humanity's example were spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. High Counselor Threshmar stood alone in the Council chamber, his ethereal form flickering with what observers might have interpreted as anxiety. The other 11 council seats remained empty as their occupants dealt with crises on their own homeworlds. The 1,000-year-old political structure that had brought stability to the galaxy was crumbling, and the ancient being found himself contemplating something unprecedented: negotiation with a lesser species. President Helen Murphy received the communication request while reviewing casualty reports from the latest human operations against Dominion infrastructure. The message was brief and carried the full authority of the Council itself, a request for diplomatic negotiations to discuss terms for ending hostilities. "They want to talk," Murphy announced to her assembled advisors in the White House Situation Room. After 1,000 years of imposed rule, the Council is asking for negotiations. Admiral Jake Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying the formal diplomatic language that had been used in the alien message. "It's unprecedented. Our intelligence sources indicate that the Council has never negotiated with any species they classified as primitive. They either integrated willing subjects or eliminated resistant ones." Dr. Amy Rodriguez, now serving as humanity's chief scientific advisor for alien technology, added her perspective from months of studying captured Dominion equipment. Their entire governmental structure was built on the assumption of technological and cultural superiority. By defeating them with inferior technology and unconventional tactics, we've undermined the foundation of their authority. The negotiations were scheduled to take place aboard Concordia Station, a neutral facility controlled by the Merchant Guild in the frontier region, between Dominion space and the independent worlds. Admiral Morrison led the human delegation, accompanied by Dr. Rodriguez, General Paul Carter, and a small team of advisors. The station itself was a marvel of alien engineering, built by a dozen different species using technologies that represented centuries of galactic cooperation. But as the human delegation arrived, they could see signs of the changing political situation everywhere. Ships from independent worlds docked alongside Dominion vessels, their crews eyeing each other with suspicion and barely contained hostility. The Council's delegation was smaller than expected, consisting only of Threshmar and 2 other ancient beings whose species had been founding members of the original Dominion. The absence of the Zephyrian representative was notable, as that species had effectively withdrawn from galactic politics following the psychological warfare campaign on their homeworld. Threshmar materialized across the negotiating table from Admiral Morrison, his ethereal form stabilizing into something approaching solid matter. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics of what humans might have recognized as respect. "Admiral Morrison, your species has accomplished something remarkable. In less than 1 standard galactic year, you have changed the fundamental nature of political discourse across our galaxy." Morrison studied the ancient being carefully, noting the signs of strain in his energy pattern. "We didn't set out to change anything, Counselor. We just refused to surrender our freedom to beings who demanded it as tribute." The ethereal's form flickered, with what might have been amusement. "Yes, and in doing so you have taught other species that our authority is not inevitable. The concept of voluntary governance has spread to worlds that have not questioned our rule in centuries." The Council's offer was comprehensive, and by galactic standards, generous. Recognition of human sovereignty over a significant stellar region, access to Dominion technology and trade networks, and a seat on the Council itself with full voting rights. In exchange, humanity would cease its disruptive military operations and help restore order to the galaxy. Morrison listened to the terms with growing understanding of just how desperate the Council had become. They were offering humanity everything they had ever denied to other species, including participation in the very government that had once threatened them with extinction. "Your offer assumes we want to join a system we've been working to destroy," Morrison replied after careful consideration. "You're asking us to help you restore the same order that brought us to the brink of genocide." Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward to address the Council delegation directly. Our analysis of your governmental structure indicates that it's fundamentally designed to prevent the kind of advancement we represent. You maintain stability by suppressing innovation and change. That's not order, it's stagnation. General Carter added his military perspective. Every species we've encountered expresses the same pattern. They develop to a certain point, encounter the Dominion, and then their advancement stops. You preserve civilizations in amber while calling it protection. Threshmar's form solidified as he focused his attention on the human criticism. Stability prevents the wars and destructions that historically consumed developing species. Our guidance has preserved billions of lives and maintained galactic peace for a millennium. Whose peace? Morrison asked. The peace of the ruled or the peace of the rulers? From what we've seen, your stability depends on keeping other species dependent on your technology and authority. The negotiations continued for 3 days, but it became clear that the fundamental difference in philosophy could not be bridged. The Council viewed governance as a responsibility of advanced species to manage lesser ones. Humanity viewed governance as something that derived authority from the consent of the governed. On the final day, Threshmar made a desperate attempt to find common ground. If you will not accept integration into our system, perhaps we can coexist. Your species could govern your region while we maintain control over established Dominion space. Morrison shook his head. You still don't understand. We're not seeking to carve out a territory for ourselves. We're opposing the entire concept of imposed authority. Every species should have the right to determine its own destiny. The negotiations broke down completely when the Council realized that humanity would accept nothing less than the dissolution of the Dominion system itself. But as the delegations prepared to return to their respective territories, Threshmar made one final revelation that changed everything. There is something you should know before we part, the ethereal said, his form flickering with what humans would recognize as resignation. The Dominion possesses a weapon capable of destroying entire star systems. It was created during the wars that established our authority, and has never been used since. Admiral Morrison felt the temperature in the room drop as the implications sank in. You're threatening to commit genocide on a galactic scale? Not threatening, Threshmar replied. Warning. There are Council members who believe that preserving the Dominion justifies any action, including the destruction of Earth and every world that has declared independence. Captain Billy Walsh's younger brother, Lieutenant Tony Walsh, now commanded the UES Retribution as part of humanity's expanded fleet. His orders were simple. If the Dominion deployed planet-killing weapons, his fleet was authorized to respond with humanity's own ultimate deterrent. The response had been prepared months earlier by Dr. Frank Pierce's weapons development team. Every Dominion Council member's homeworld had been surveyed, mapped, and targeted by human sleeper weapons placed during covert operations. If Earth died, the ancient species that ruled the galaxy would die with it. Morrison's final message to the Council was broadcast across the galaxy, heard by every species struggling with questions of independence and self-determination. The Dominion Council threatens to destroy worlds rather than allow them to govern themselves. This is not the action of benevolent guardians, but of tyrants clinging to power. The ultimatum was clear. If the Council used planet-killing weapons against any independent world, humanity would respond by destroying every Council member's homeworld simultaneously. The ancient beings who had ruled through technological superiority suddenly faced an enemy willing to ensure mutual destruction rather than accept subjugation. 3 days later, High Counselor Threshmar transmitted the Dominion Council's final message to the galaxy. The ancient governmental structure that had ruled for a millennium was formally dissolved. Member species were released from all obligations and encouraged to form new alliances, based on mutual cooperation rather than imposed authority. The ethereals and other ancient species retreated to their homeworlds. Their age of dominance ended not by superior force but by a simple refusal to acknowledge their right to rule. The galaxy they left behind was chaotic, uncertain, and completely free for the first time in recorded history. Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of humanity's flagship, watching as former Dominion worlds celebrated their independence across the communication networks. Ships from dozens of species moved freely through space lanes that had once required Council permission to use.